Hey everyone, what's up, etc, etc, etc. I'm Taco Man, welcome to the video. Anyway, so a little while ago I was talking with my good friend Chocky Bicky, and yeah, definitely check him out as well if you're into gaming or you want to watch people suffer, because that's what I do, links in the description. Anyway, so yeah, we started talking about things that had greatly influenced us over the years, and like, for me there's a few things. There's, movies, mainly horror being a massive one of those, gaming, like sport, a whole heap of stuff like that. Anyway, but the big one was probably music for me. So I got kind of asked, okay, could I name a band starting with every letter of the alphabet that had really influenced me and like influenced my taste in music and who I am, I guess. So yeah, I started writing down a list of every letter in the alphabet except for maybe one or two, and then I wrote another one and another one until I had a fair few bands for pretty much every letter. So I've narrowed it all down to basically one, and essentially what I'm going to do is do like a bit of a retrospective series on each one of those bands, starting with, every letter of the alphabet. So yeah, today I'm going to talk about, a band that got me pretty heavily invested into the heavy music scene. It's really hard to pin down one kind of genre that they fall into. Like, they have played metalcore, they've played hard rock, they've played a bit of thrash, progressive metal. In general, there's just a bit of a blend of a whole heap of influences. But yeah, anyway, I'm talking about Avenged Sevenfold. So they're a band that started out in the Orange County, emo, punk, hardcore sort of scene, and they grew and grew, and they started headlining pretty much every major festival in the world, selling out stadiums wherever they go, and they're just going from strength to strength at the moment, and they really brought me into heavy music as a whole. So, yeah. What I'll do is, first things first, I'll play a bit of one of their latest songs for you. So this is off of their latest album, The Stage. The Stage.
So lost in ego, didn't notice when the time it slipped away.
Yeah, everybody's got a song.
Jesus Christ was born to die. Leave it to man to levitate his own idolize. Well, simply sowed your path with no communication, baby. I see your angle, but we're different from my points of view.
So tell me, what's your cross to bear?
Who is the crowd that appeals to the cage as we perform here upon the stage? Tell me a lie in a beautiful way. I believe in answers, just like today.
So, yeah, I got into these guys way before they released The Stage. They'd just come out of their more or less straight metalcore era, with albums like Sounding the Seventh Trumpet and Waking the Fallen. They began to start to blend, a few other influences into their music, and the result was an album called City of Evil. And I'm fairly sure that a lot of people would have a pretty similar story of how they got into the band. Being a 15-ish, maybe, year-old kid who, owned a PS2, I had got my hands on a copy of Guitar Hero 2. Obviously working my way through this game on that. The soundtrack was phenomenal, introduced me to a lot of bands that to this day I really love, that Butthole Surfers, Primus, stuff like that. But yeah, I got to, I think, the second last set, and yeah, Avenged Sevenfold song came up, and it's like, whoa, holy shit, this is insane. I loved it. It was heavy, but it was accessible. It was kind of challenging to play, but it was also really fun. Challenging for Guitar Hero anyway. But yeah, talking of course about Beast and the Harlots. So from there, I pretty much went and listened to the entirety of City of Evil almost immediately. To this day, I'd probably put it as my maybe joint favourite album from the band. Like, it's maybe not their best, but it's, yeah, one of my absolute favourites nonetheless. It seemed that they had matured a lot since their previous album, Waking the Fallen. Everything had kind of just clicked into place. Every member of the band was clearly talented as all hell, and it was like they were kind of still holding something back though, so they didn't put too much into the album and make it basically just like endless guitar wankery and like, oh look what we can do. Everything that was in there that they put in there had its place. The result was basically an album that was really fun to listen to. Yeah, like it was so full of incredible songs like, you know, MIA, Sidewinder, Backcountry. Like every single song on that album is, in my mind, at least a 9 out of 10. And I think this is where they started really bringing in a lot of progressive elements to the music. And yeah, it's kind of like laying the blueprint for what was to come, and I feel like it did it a bit better than their next album. But yeah, like, I'm pretty glad this was the first album I listened to from them, because Waking the Fallen, while I have grown to love it and believe that it is one of the best metalcore albums released in that sort of era, it's not very polished. City of Evil, the production value on it is just so much better. But yeah, give you a taste of Waking the Fallen, here is Second Heartbeat. So yeah, going back to what I said about the progressive metal elements to City of Evil, like, I guess my point is kind of like these guys that were bringing in influences, not only from where they started off from, but they started looking elsewhere and looking into like what the bands that they had loved growing up, and kind of bringing little bits from every genre in and just kind of melting them all together. Like it touched on, yeah, obviously metalcore, progressive metal, but there was also a lot of punk, there was hard rock, there was even like a bit of country at some points. The band look, and they still kinda do in a way, like a couple of like the stereotypical meathead jocks had said, okay, we want to start a band, so what we're going to do is go down to the music room, find a couple of nerdy guitar players and drummers and stuff who love, you know, Motley Crue, Dream Theater, and just kind of basically say, okay, what do you like, what do we like? Let's just make something that suits everybody and screw what anyone thinks, and against all kind of like what you would expect to happen, it actually works. Like, it shouldn't have. Like, the fact that they've got so much, for lack of a better word, mainstream success, and they're such a well-known band, it doesn't make sense, because like most of their songs are between 5 and 6 minutes long. So like that, their average song is probably close to 6 minutes, which isn't exactly the blueprint for a successful band. Like, they just seem to, you know, appeal to pretty much everybody at that time that was, you know, into heavy music. Well, not everyone. They really seem to piss off a lot of like the self-proclaimed true metalheads who thought this band coming in and taking the world by storm was absolutely terrible. Like, they weren't a metal band at all. Like, they're generally just gatekeeping the shit out of the genre. And honestly, like, I can't completely reject their arguments at that point. Like, as I said, Avenged Sevenfold, they're playing like this mixture of a whole bunch of different genres. They're not playing traditional metal. Like, yeah, they're not a typical metal band. Their self-titled album, the one they released after City of Evil, like, it was probably closer to hard rock than metal. Like, they weren't Metallica, they weren't Testament, they're not gonna be like the next Exodus. But, and here's something I've stood by for a very long time, something I believe wholeheartedly, they were introducing people to those bands. Like, I remember there was one guy I used to call a friend who, once he really found out, like, once he got really into proper metal, he started saying like, oh, you like Avenged Sevenfold and, you know, bands like that? Well, it's like entry-level shit. And it's like, okay, say you're right. How is that a bad thing? So, like, if there's no entry-level bands, how does, say like Behemoth, for example, black metal band, I don't think you'd find many people who would argue that they're not a true metal band. How does their main singer-songwriter Nurgle, how does he continue to make a living making the music that you claim to love if there's no one else being brought into the genre to discover those bands? And, like, as the audience gets older, so do the bands, and if there's no new blood, for lack of a better word, coming in, yeah, how do they sustain what they're doing? And also, if that's the case, it's very much a dying genre, because if there's no one being brought in, if there's no entry-level bands to bring people in, where are the next Metallica coming from? Where's the next Behemoth coming from? You know, it's, you know, that's just, I guess, my view on that.
You say Just a big fucking deception, one best fear. I'll be waiting. It's the insecure, let me see it now.
So yeah, more on that in a little while, but for now let's get back to the band. So yeah, after City of Evil, they went on to release a few more albums. Next to them, like I said, their self-titled record. I think it reached number 4 or so on like the Billboard charts in America. And for a metal band to do that, it's pretty much unheard of, really. Like it propelled the band to massive success. Prompted them to release a live DVD, which to this day is one of the best sounding live recordings that I personally have heard. But yeah, unfortunately that album, like, it was the last album featuring, well not featuring, I think they did have a few on Nightmare, but last album to basically have James the Rev Sullivan as their drummer before his death. There's a lot that I could go into about him, so what I'm going to do in the interest of time is just boil it down to saying that in the scene at that time, he was one of the best drummers going. From all accounts, he was a ridiculously nice, good person, and he was ridiculously talented. Like, for example, here is a taste of a song he personally wrote, one of my personal favourites, the absolutely batshit insane A Little Piece of Heaven.
Smiling right from ear to ear, almost laughed herself to tears. Must have stabbed him 50 fucking times. I can't believe it. Ripped his heart out right before his eyes. All over his head. Now that I finally realize the error of my ways, I must venture back to apologize from someone far beyond the grave. I gotta make up for what I've done, 'cause I was all up in a piece of heaven.
So after the death of the Rev, like Avenged Sevenfold, obviously they were in need of a drummer, and if their prog credibility was ever in doubt, that doubt was instantly swept away by the announcement that no other than Mike Portnoy from Dream Theater at the time was going to be filling in for the recording of a new album. And that album, Nightmare, was a ridiculously solid piece of music, like leaning even further away from their metalcore roots. I'd say it's kind of like a City of Evil 2.0. Yeah, it drew from even more sort of genres. It was a little less accessible than their self-titled album, but personally, this, like I said, City of Evil was probably my joint favourite album. This would be my other joint favourite album from the band. Like, the talent in there was becoming kind of hard to ignore from the detractors. Yeah, like, the album, I think it did hit number 1 on the charts, which again, for a metal band, is just unbelievable. They basically got a new drummer, because obviously Mike Portnoy was only filling in for the recording of the album. Former Confide drummer, Aaron Islej, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Whatever, I don't care. But yeah, he was confirmed to be joining the band. They set off on another world tour. Like, the fans absolutely seem to love the new material, like how raw it felt, how honest, and I think having the vast majority of songs on that album feel like they were about the Rev and his death and like how it's made the band feel as a whole, like that definitely comes across in there. I think a lot of people really resonated with that. But yeah, it also helped make that album probably the band's darkest at that point. Alright, so we're back to those lovely true metalheads now, because the next album that Avenged Sevenfold are going to release is Hail to the King. And yeah, a lot of people seem to just jump on the hate bandwagon, because this shitty band that's playing entry-level music to emo teenagers dared to draw a massive influence from some of the biggest metal bands going. Like, it was insane. Most of the songs had very clear inspirations, but I guess like the talk had changed from Avenged Sevenfold sucks because they don't play real metal to Avenged Sevenfold sucks because they're ripping off our favourite bands and they're playing real metal. Yeah, but I will absolutely admit it is not too much of a stretch at all to call This Means War a rip-off of Metallica's Sad But True. However, for the most part, the rest of the album just felt like it was wearing its influences on its sleeves. In saying that, the band really seemed to have lost a lot of their identity. They lost a lot of the stuff that made them great. The record itself, it was not bad. It was a good album, but it didn't feel like an Avenged Sevenfold album, to me anyway. It's definitely, out of all their albums, for me, it is my least favourite. It's the one that I have listened to by far the least. Mainly because, if I want to listen to a Metallica album, I'll go listen to a Metallica album. If I wanted to go listen to a Guns N' Roses album, I'd go listen to a Guns N' Roses album. It just didn't resonate with me, essentially. Yeah, because I haven't really listened to it that much, don't really have much else to say on that album, so let's move on. So yeah, their next album, their latest album, The Stage, earlier I said that City of Evil might not be their best album, but was one of my favourites. This, to me, is their best album. Aaron Isla J is gone. Basically, I'm not sure if he got kicked out or he left, or if it was like a mutual agreement sort of thing, but I think they all said it's not working. But his replacement is one of my favourite drummers of all time, drummer for a very long time of one of my favourite bands, Bad Religion, as well as among many others, the Vandals, Korn, Suicidal Tendencies, Tenacious D, and also the winner of my personal, Best Drummer Name Award, Brooks Wackerman. So yeah, Avenged Sevenfold lean fully into their kind of like nerdy, progressive influences. Like The Stage, it's a concept album about artificial intelligence and the self-destruction of society. It has a song that's almost 16 minutes long and features a voiceover by Neil deGrasse Tyson. The title track itself is about 8 minutes long. It draws influence, obviously, massively from progressive metal and metalcore, hard rock, but, you know, also like thrash, black metal even. Like, the identity crisis, if you're going to call it that, of Hail to the King was kind of gone, and it kind of just felt like, you know, the band's back.
Heaven works on borrowed time. Walk alone. Empty pages burn forever mine. Walk alone. Masquerade us up on high. All we are is all we've left
So yeah, the band's lasting influence is sure to be massive. Like I said, they draw massive crowds wherever they go. For me, like, I had an interest in metalcore and heavier music when I'd first heard of them. Like, I was getting into it, but they basically opened up the floodgates, and they basically just opened up my musical taste massively. It was like, yeah, like they opened up the floodgates and they introduced me to other bands, which in turn introduced me to other bands. Like I said, if they're an entry-level band, I am proof that it works for the scene, essentially. So, like, I was, to that point, like, my favourite bands were bands like, you know, Blink-182, Good Charlotte, Green Day, stuff like that. Kind of like the pop-punky sort of stuff. Now, I am driving 12 hours straight to the next city across in Australia to basically be front row to see Slayer's final shows and get my face burned off by Behemoth and shit like that. So, yeah, as an entry-level band, they've done their damn job, you know? So yeah, like, I think for the scene as a whole as well, they've obviously brought a lot of people into it, and the amount of bands that I feel would kind of owe their existence to bands like Avenged Sevenfold, it's massive. Like, a lot of the newer, heavier bands that meld genres, like, I'm not saying, for instance, they are one, but say like Northlane going from a metalcore band to kind of like a new metal with that sort of influence and melding them all together. Like, Avenged Sevenfold, I'm not saying they were the first to do it, but they were one of the most successful bands at doing it, and they showed that it can be done. But yeah, that's, I guess, all for this one. I put together a Spotify playlist of all the Avenged Sevenfold songs I've used in this video, links in the description. If you're still here, what's wrong with you? But thanks for watching. You know, like, subscribe, all that sort of shit. I'm gonna just leave this video going out with one of the band's biggest hits from their live DVD as well, Bat Country, off of the album City of Evil. Next video I do, I'm going to be randomizing the order I do these. It's not just going to be A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever. Keeps it a bit fresher, I guess. But yeah, whatever one that one ends up being, I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers. Bye.
We're gonna take you down, down, down to a place called Backcountry.